I live in Berlin since about 11 or 12 years. I was not really doing music before, and I started when I was there. I studied sound studies. So I would say maybe first I did kind of installation or audio pieces, etc. And then it developed into live performances, and I prefer this format also because I feel like it's the format that is the most accessible in some way and where you can really reach some sort of intensity that I'm searching for. So yeah, Berlin was really determinant in my music making path. One important thing to know is that I'm always using Max MSP, and in this piece today it's only sound synthesis. I mean, at some point there's some sort of sample, but I basically sampled myself some sound synthesis that I did, like something else. So it's called manifolds, so it's a mathematical term. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily about this, the piece, but I think since a few months, maybe a year, I've been reading a lot about physics, mathematics, etc. And I've always been interested in nonlinear perception of time and nonlinear perception of space. And so a manifold, to explain it simply, it's a space that on a local level you perceive it as flat, but the whole structure is curved or much more complex also. So there's this idea of scales and of spaces that are not linear and not like the usual type of perception we are used to. And this was sort of a background inspiration maybe for me to think about the piece. It's quite complex. There's a lot of different sound events, different parts also who are really different from each other. Like you go from one space to another, kind of seamlessly and at the same time quite abruptly. Of course, it was important that I'm going to do it for the Acousmonium. I work a lot multi-channel, and this is a really special format. And when I do something, I always think about it. So this is why I feel like working for this, let's say, instrument or this speaker system kind of force you to work a lot with texture. Also, I have a lot of small sound events which I thought it would sound good when it's distributed in the room and moving around. In some way, I feel like it's also accumulation of a lot of things that I worked on in the last year, also technically. There's a lot of new technical things that I tried in terms of sound synthesis, in terms of processes that I used in Max MSP. So I think it's more of a, let's say, a result of where I am now, musically. In some way. I make a new patch for each composition or each project I do, and I design everything myself. The software itself can be seen as my instrument, and when I'm patching, I'm kind of improvising already. It's part of the composition process. So the program is the composition in some way, or because I design patches which are really made for certain processes, and I don't use them for something else, or in general, they just work for that. So I tend to have a really minimalistic approach as well. And when I design my patches, they are not really instruments that you play. They are not designed to be played by someone else. I also don't use plugins, etc. Because really for me, this process first helps me to understand those processes more deeper. The more I program and the more I understand how certain sound synthesis work, and I feel like the more I can experiment some more and break certain boundaries. It's really rare that I use something else. One or two times I use samples, but most of the time it's samples that I made or etc. But most of the time it's really sound synthesis. And it's right. I think what's maybe interesting in this piece is that at the very beginning it sounds like a sample or like voices of people screaming, or this is my perception now of it. But actually this was sound synthesis at the beginning, which I reprocessed afterward, etc. So it's quite interesting that you're going from this really synthetic sounds towards something that really sounds like almost some kind of remnants of human voices. Yeah, and I work a lot with this, some of this like gray area between what is natural and what is synthetic is really interesting for me. What is human, non-human, etc.